At 5:17 a.m., the Combat Information Center aboard the American aircraft carrier went dead silent for a split second. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything was happening all at once. 6 fresh surface contacts flooded the radar screens all at once. They fanned across the northern edge of the Strait of Hormuz like a switchblade opening in the pitch black. Outside, the sea was still bruised black under the final stretch of night. The horizon was barely visible. The carrier flight deck glowed under red and white work lights, sailors rushing between parked jets and heavily chained down gear. Inside CIC, the screens told another story. Contact 1 bearing 270. Contact 2 bearing 281. Contact 3, 290. 3 more staggered behind them seconds later. Nobody called them Iranian just yet. Just unknown surface contacts, fast enough to matter, coordinated enough to trip the alarm. The carrier held its course, steady through international waters. Her massive hull carving a white wake through the narrow corridor. Around her, escort ships locked formation, every destroyer parked exactly where doctrine demanded it be. Then the classifications snapped into focus. 6 Iranian naval vessels. The tactical display shifted. Threat symbols changed. Distances tightened. Speed vectors stretched across the glass, like thin red needles stabbing toward the carrier's path. The watch officer leaned closer. 6 surface contacts closing from the northwest. Formation spread, range 12 nautical miles, and dropping fast, he told the bridge. The captain never raised his voice. He really didn't need to. That was always the first thing junior sailors noticed in tense moments. The ship weighed nearly 100,000 tons. Threats closed in from 6 distinct angles. The ocean became a deadly chessboard in seconds, but the captain's voice stayed dead flat. Hold course, log everything, bring escorts to high readiness. Nobody asked him to repeat it. The orders surged through the massive carrier like raw electricity. Up top, yellow shirts froze for half a beat as the command crackled through their heavy headsets. Below deck, crews locked into stations. In CIC, radar operators started shouting bearing changes in clipped bursts. The electronic warfare, the air picture, the surface picture, the carrier's own plotted track, all of it violently merged into one shrinking problem. The Strait of Hormuz left zero room for drama. It was narrow, choked, and totally unforgiving. A supercarrier just couldn't swerve out of the way like a patrol boat. Any sudden turn could smash them right into passing commercial oil tankers. Punching the gas might spark an escalation. One wrong radio call becomes a global headline by dawn. So, the carrier held steady. That was answer number 1. The Iranian ships didn't. At 5:19, Contact 1 sped up. Contact 3 shifted outward. Contact 5 slowed down, then hooked inward, perfectly anchoring the tail of a forming battle arc. This pattern wasn't random. It was highly deliberate, noticeable enough to track, and dangerous enough to formally document. Combat to bridge, the surface watch called. Contacts are opening into a crescent formation. Lead vessel now bearing 276. Range 10.8 nautical miles. The captain stared out over the dark water. He still couldn't see a single thing with the naked eye. Just the dead black horizon and the faint glow of the carrier's navigation lights. But down on the radar screens, a literal ambush was taking shape. The very first radio hail went out. Unidentified Iranian naval vessels. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. Maintain a safe distance and state your intentions immediately. Only static answered. They repeated the message. Still nothing. At 5:21, the escort destroyer on the carrier's starboard side adjusted position just a few degrees. Not a retreat, not a challenge, just a clean, defensive correction. sliding right between the carrier and the widening Iranian arc. Its radar arrays were already wide awake. Combat systems listening, tracking, and measuring everything. Then the Iranian formation tightened right back up. The lead ship sliced across the carrier's forward sector, still miles away, but no longer running parallel. Its bow angled sharply toward the projected track of the American carrier. Two vessels behind it pushed wider, one heading north, one drifting south, pinching the water ahead of the carrier into a tight, narrowing lane. Inside the CIC, the numbers came faster. Range 9.4 nautical miles. Lead contact changing course. CPA decreasing. Contact 2 and 4 opening lateral separation. The captain took the update without even turning from the forward windows. Closest point of approach, 6.2 nautical miles if they hold speed and heading. A pause. Another voice from the sea. C. Correction. Lead contact increasing speed. CPA under 5. That completely changed the air in the room. Not visibly or dramatically, but every single sailor felt it. The kind of shift that happens when a maneuver stops being simple surveillance and starts becoming real pressure. The carrier still refused to turn away. That was the second answer. At 5:23, long-range cameras finally caught the first visual outline. A low gray hull pushing through the half-light, a sharp wake trailing behind it. Then another, then a third. These Iranian vessels were no longer just green radar symbols. They were cold steel, engines, crews, and hostile intent. On the flight deck, an MH-60R Seahawk sat chained and ready, crew moving toward the aircraft. Nearby, deck crews secured tie-downs around park. Fighters. Meanwhile, the carrier pushed forward through the dark water. Enormous, steady, and exposed by design, but protected by hidden layers no adversary could ever see all at once. Then that lead Iranian warship made its very next move. At 5:24, it turned hard to starboard. This new course cut directly across the American carrier's path. CIC called it immediately. Bridge, lead contact is crossing the bow line. The captain replied without hesitation. Sound tactical alert. Escorts, hold position. Do not deviate unless ordered. The carrier's forward gun mounts stayed perfectly still. The escorts tracked. The cameras kept recording. Every radar sweep, every course change, and every second of silence was captured. Out there in the Strait of Hormuz, 6 Iranian warships just kept closing the distance. By 5:24 and 30 seconds, the range dropped below 8 nautical miles. The ambush had officially begun. At 5:24 and 30 seconds, the lead Iranian ship crossed the carrier's forward sector, not close enough to collide, but close enough to force a decision. Right there on the tactical display. Its projected track sliced across the American carrier's bow like a line drawn with pure intent. 2 more Iranian vessels pushed wide to the carrier's starboard side, their wakes bending outward in pale arcs behind them. Another ship held back to the north. 2 more hung back behind the lead element. They moved slowly, almost patiently, like they were daring the American formation to blink first. The Supercarrier did not flinch. She held her course, a massive shadow slipping through the Strait of Hormuz, her flight deck lights piercing the thick early morning haze. Her escort destroyer slid a bit farther forward on the starboard quarter, planting itself right between the carrier and the closest Iranian vessel. It was a tiny shift, just a minor position correction, but in naval language, it spoke volumes. You do not get a clean shot at the carrier. Inside the Combat Information Center, the surface plot tightened by the second. Contact 1 crossing ahead. Range 7.8 nautical miles. Contact 2 opening starboard. Contact 3 is matching speed. Contact 5 holding rear position. The watch team stopped talking in complete sentences. They didn't need them anymore. Bearing, range, course, speed. That was the only language now. Every single number carried weight. Every update cut through the room with the exact same cold precision as a weapon being loaded. Then, the first Iranian radar sweep struck the American formation. It wasn't a missile lock, not yet anyway, but this was no longer just passive observation. The electronic warfare officer spun away from his console. Bridge, Combat Info Center, active surface search emissions from Contact 3. Low power, repeating pattern. The captain's eyes stayed glued to the dark water ahead. Log it. A second sweep followed closely, then a third. These Iranian ships weren't just closing in anymore. They were measuring. The United States response came in layers. The destroyer's long-range optics locked onto the lead vessel. The carrier's own sensors started recording the entire hostile formation. Data streamed from ship to ship through encrypted links, building one shared picture across the strike group. Nobody fired, nobody threatened, nobody panicked. That was the American posture. Visible restraint, but invisible readiness. At 5:26, the second radio hail went out. This time, much sharper, Iranian naval vessels. This is a United States Navy carrier strike group operating in international waters. Your maneuvers are unsafe. Maintain a safe distance and state your intentions. The answer came back as static, followed by dead silence. On the flight deck, the MH-60R Seahawk's rotors started turning, slowly at first, then faster, slashing the damp air above the carrier. Sailors crouched low, moving with practiced urgency around the aircraft. This helicopter wasn't being launched for an attack. It was launching to sea, to record, and to apply intense pressure from above. Here in the Strait of Hormuz, sight matters, so does being seen. At 5:27, Contact 4 made its move. It turned inward. The formation shifted from a loose crescent into something tighter, something shaped a lot less like surveillance and more like containment. The lead Iranian ship still held its course, cutting right across the carrier's projected path. Two others angled directly toward the starboard side. Another drifted wider, almost like it was trying to stretch the American escort thin. Closest approach is 4.6 miles. Contact 1 crossing the bowline. Contact 4 closing the starboard sector. The captain finally turned toward the deck officer. Bring the starboard escort to tactical screen position. No aggressive maneuvering. Aye, Captain. The order moved instantly. Ahead of the carrier, the destroyer adjusted its position again, slicing a sharp defensive line between the Iranian arc and the carrier's starboard side. Its hull knifed through the water, restrained but undeniable. Up on the forward deck, the 5-inch gun stayed still, but the cameras were tracking everything. The message wasn't theatrical. It was pure procedure. We see you. We are recording you. We are ready. At 5:28, the lead Iranian vessel broke radio silence. The voice crackled through, clipped and deliberate. United States vessel, alter your course immediately. You are nearing restricted waters. The American response took less than 5 seconds. Iranian vessel. This is a United States Navy warship conducting a lawful transit in international waters. Maintain a safe distance. Alter unsafe course now. No arguing, no politics, no grandstanding. Just position, international law, and warning. The Iranian ship refused to budge. Instead, Contact 3 suddenly hit the throttle. Its wake sharpened like a blade, white water churning violently aft. Through the carrier's long-range optic, the boat's dark outline sharpened against the morning gray. Sailors were visible up on deck, sudden movement near the back. A heavy tarp caught the wind, giving a quick glimpse of sharp angles along the rear deck. In the control room, operators magnified the feed. A weapons officer leaned in. Possible launcher covers spotted on contact 3. Cannot confirm. The captain took it calmly. Do not label hostile without hard confirmation. Keep recording. Right there, that's the difference between true power and impulse. Iran wanted to squeeze the clock. Force a sudden turn, force a fatal mistake. Force the optic of an American carrier flinching under pressure, dead center inside the Strait of Hormuz. The United States Navy refused to hand them that victory. At 5:29, the Seahawk launched. Lifting off the flight deck in a blinding wash of sea spray and hot exhaust, the chopper banked low over the starboard rail. Its nose locked right onto the Iranian formation. The sensor ball spun down, freezing on the lead ship before sweeping across the rest. Infrared, electro-optical, and laser range finding. Every single frame time-stamped, every movement recorded. Down below, the massive carrier kept moving. Still totally steady, still on course. By 5:30, the Iranian formation tightened again. The lead boat crossed ahead now. 2 more were pushing hard on starboard. 3 more shadowed them from behind, holding a second perimeter like a closing gate. Operations called the updated tactical picture. 6 Iranian vessels are still maneuvering in a coordinated pattern. Closest range, 4.1 miles, 6 minutes to CPA. For the very first time, the bridge went dead silent. The captain stared at the radar screen, glanced out at the water, and gave the order. Set condition 3 across the entire strike group. Keep weapons tight. Nobody fires a shot unless fired upon. Across the carrier group, systems shifted, battle stations manned, sensors dialed in, and defensive grids aligned. Still absolutely no panic. Still no sudden change in course. At 5:31, the lead Iranian boat crossed the carrier's bow, cutting a hard angle toward the starboard quarter. This wasn't just a simple flyby anymore. It was a targeted squeeze. Then the electronic warfare console lit up again. A new signal, narrow, sharp, nothing like a routine surface sweep. An officer's voice sliced through the bridge. We have a guidance radar emission from contact 3. The captain stayed perfectly still, but everyone in that room knew. That ambush line had just turned into a missile window. At 5:31 and 40 seconds, the mood inside the combat center shifted. Not the alarms, the crew. That first radar sweep was broad. Surface search, posturing, something Iranian ships could easily brush off later as standard navigation and routine patrol activity. But this one was different. Narrow, controlled, and pulsing on repeat, straight from contact 3. A sharper beam, a cleaner pattern, the kind of signal that made every sailor in the combat center realize the exact same thing instantly. The Iranian ship wasn't just watching anymore. They were locking in a firing solution. Bridge, combat center, the warfare officer called. Possible missile guidance radar from contact 3, bearing 289, range 4.3 miles. Dead silence on the bridge for a second. Then the captain replied, confirm classification. Do not escalate on first emission. Aye, Captain. That command truly mattered. Out here in the Strait of Hormuz, simple mistakes could fly faster than missiles. A bad classification, a jumpy trigger finger, or an order barked too fast. Any single one could spark a tense standoff into a full regional crisis before dawn. The U.S. Navy trains for this exact razor's edge between threat and proof. The carrier was right inside it, and it held steady. An escort destroyer pushed forward a fraction, wedging itself right between the American flat top and the Iranian vessel. On the tactical screens, its symbol looked exactly like a heavy shield sliding into place. The Aegis system was already tracking every single Iranian boat. All cameras were rolling. The electronic warfare suite was listening hard for that next radar pulse. 7 seconds later, that second guidance sweep hit them. Same bearing, same ship, longer duration. Second emission confirmed. The combat center reported. Contact 3 remains active. The captain's voice stayed completely flat. Bring air defense to enhanced readiness. Weapons tight. Nobody in the room asked what that meant. It meant every defense layer was wide awake. Radar operators suddenly locked in harder. Missile crews verified their status without crossing the invisible line that turns readiness into a live engagement. The entire strike group was now operating inside a tense window where every second mattered. Above the carrier, an MH-60R Seahawk pushed toward the Iranian formation at low altitude. Heavy rotors beat across the water as the chopper dropped right down into visual range. The helicopter didn't buzz directly over the Iranian ships. It didn't even need to. It hovered just off the formation's flank, close enough to see everything, far enough back to deny Iran any excuse to fire. The sensor operator locked the MX-20 camera onto Contact 3. The feed sharpened up, a gray hull, a forward mast. Deckmutschoken, hot thermal signatures lighting up the aft section. Sailors clustering tightly near covered launch canisters. One guy bolting across the rear deck, another standing right next to what looked like a folded cover or a heavy protective tarp. The Seahawk beamed that live feed straight back to the carrier. Inside the combat center, the video popped onto a secondary screen. Visual activity aft on Contact 3. Sensor teams reported possible missile deck prep in progress. Unable to confirm launch posture, the captain stared at that screen for 2 long seconds. Keep recording. At 5:33, the carrier launched its first pair of FA-18 Super Hornets. The catapult slammed forward. White steam exploded across the flight deck. A jet punched through the dawn haze, its afterburners blazing orange against the gray water. Another followed seconds later. These launches were absolutely not retaliation. No strike orders here. Just raw presence, visible, measured, and totally unmistakable. The Iranian crews watched them climb. That was the entire point. The lead Super Hornet carved a wide arc above the carrier group, staying high enough to avoid sparking conflict, but close enough to remind the Iranian formation this carrier wasn't just some boat on the water. It was a floating airfield, fully awake, stacking lethal options by the second. At 0534, Contact 1 adjusted course. The lead Iranian ship that crossed their bow now sliced toward the carrier's starboard quarter. Contact 2 copied the exact move from the outside flank. Contact 3 held center, radar still pulsing intermittently. 3 more Iranian warships hung back, forming a second line across the Strait of Hormuz. This wasn't just a simple close pass anymore. It was a layered squeeze. Contact 1 approach, 3.2 miles. Contact 3 went active again. Contact 2 pushed its speed. The starboard side destroyer blasted out the next radio warning. Iranian naval vessels, your current maneuvers are unsafe. Drop your targeting radar and change course immediately. No answer, just a third radar pulse. This time, the emission lasted long enough for the carrier's systems to lock down a firm classification. The electronic warfare officer glanced back. Contact 3 is holding a guidance radar pattern, matches anti-ship missile fire control. Those words hit hard, but nobody flinched. The U.S. Navy doesn't need screaming to show urgency. They rely on procedure, prep, electronic countermeasures, the captain ordered. Hold release until authorized. The carrier's defensive systems quietly shifted gear right beneath the skin of the ship. The escorting ships tightened their posture. The destroyer's combat systems quickly assigned tracks. Out on the edge, the cruiser expanded the air picture. Every sensor fed one shared network. And the network built one conclusion. If a missile left its rail, the strike group would instantly know. At 5:36, the Iranian ship fired something. A brilliant flare shot from Contact 3's aft deck, burning upward into the pale morning sky. For 2 agonizing seconds, nobody outside the machines knew what it was. Up on the bridge, sailors froze dead. Down on the flight deck, heads whipped toward the flash. Inside CIC, radar operators braced for the track that would decide absolutely everything. No inbound missile track popped up. 0 C skimming contacts. No acceleration signature, just a signal flare. CIC confirmed, no missile launch. Repeat, no missile launch. The captain didn't flinch, just said, continue tracking. But that flare did exactly what they wanted. It injected a pure dose of uncertainty. It compressed time. It forced the American systems to prove themselves under intense pressure. Up above, the Super Hornets adjusted. One climbed higher, stretching out their visual envelope. The second jet held a sweeping orbit behind the carrier group. The Seahawk chopper kept recording Contact 3, cameras locked dead on that aft deck. Then the Iranian formation shifted again. At 5:38, 2 ships broke from the rear. Contacts 5 and 6 punched the gas at the same time. Banking away from the carrier, they aimed straight for the American escort destroyer guarding the starboard flank. Their wakes turned razor sharp. The surface plot instantly redrew. Bridge. 2 Iranian boats just split off. They're heading for the starboard escort. The captain studied the screen. The carrier was the ambush point. Now, the whole trap was shifting. Alert the escort, he ordered. They might be trying to isolate her. Outside, the massive carrier pushed steadily forward through the Strait of Hormuz. Jets circled high above, while the Iranian lead ship held its course to starboard. 2 Iranian warships were now charging the destroyer. The entire ambush had morphed. The carrier wasn't the only target. At 5:38, 2 Iranian warships broke formation. Their bows swung hard toward the American destroyer guarding the carrier's starboard flank. Their wakes instantly turned sharp. White water kicked up behind them as their engines screamed through the tight sea lane. Back inside the carrier's dark combat information center, the tactical display completely morphed in seconds. That crescent trapping the carrier turned into something far deadlier, a split maneuver. 2 Iranian ships pressed the escort. Another held a missile radar posture right near the center. The lead vessel stayed pinned right off the carrier's bow. The remaining Iranian warships hung back, forming a second gate across the strait. The captain caught it instantly. They're trying to rip the screen apart, he said. Nobody argued. That was their play. Force the destroyer to react. Make her pivot. Make her expose the carrier's vulnerable starboard side. If the escort broke rank for even a second, the Iranians would get their perfect propaganda shot. An American carrier group forced off course in the Strait of Hormuz. But the destroyer did not blink. She held the line. Her bow sliced the water at a steady clip, angled just enough to stay perfectly between the Iranian boats and the carrier. Not charging, not retreating, just blocking. Her Aegis system tracked every single contact, her cameras locked on. The electronic warfare suite listened to every single radar pulse spitting off the Iranian formation. The carrier radioed across the strike group net. Starboard escort, maintain screen. Do not overcommit. Air assets are covering. The reply came back completely calm. Roger. Holding screen. High above the formation. The first FA-18 Super Hornet widened its orbit, pushing into plain sight right over the Iranian line. The second hung further back, higher and quieter, feeding the tactical picture without turning the sky into a threat display. The MH-60R chopper stayed low off the Iranian flank. Its sensor ball locked onto Contact 3, the exact ship emitting the guidance radar. Every single frame was recorded, every movement time-stamped. Every Iranian maneuver became hard evidence. At 5:40, Contact 5 increased speed again. Contact 5 at 27 knots, Combat Center called, heading for starboard escort. Range 2.9 nautical miles. The American destroyer answered with a slight rudder correction. Just a few degrees, enough to block the angle, but not enough to look aggressive. That was the razor's edge. Out in open water, space buys commanders time. In the Strait of Hormuz, space disappears. Thousands of yards vanish in minutes. The difference between steady resolve and total escalation is just one turn of the wheel. The Iranian ship kept pushing forward. The destroyer's bridge issued a final warning. Iranian naval vessel. This is a United States Navy warship. Your approach is unsafe. Alter course immediately. Static, a sharp burst of radio noise, then dead silence. At 5:41, the Seahawk's sensor operator zoomed in on Contact 3. The rear deck was buzzing. Crews swarmed the covered missile tubes. One sailor yanked back what looked like a blast shield. Another pointed right at the American destroyer. The targeting radar pulsed again, shorter but unmistakable. Contact 3 active, combat info reported. Emissions directed across the strike group, likely supporting Contacts 5 and 6. The captain narrowed his eyes. They were coordinating, and right then, the ambush started working against the Iranians. The Iranian flotilla had tipped its hand. Their lead warship exposed the crossing angle. Contact 3 gave away their radar tactics. Contacts 5 and 6 revealed their squeeze play on the escort. Their secondary line broadcasted exactly where the trap was meant to snap shut. Now the U.S. Navy saw the whole picture. The carrier strike group answered entirely without firing a shot. The starboard destroyer held the blockade. Farther out, the cruiser widened its radar sweep. Above them, the Super Hornet shifted. Every Iranian bridge crew could now spot its shadow against the dawn sky. The Seahawk pushed in closer, still avoiding direct overhead flight, but near enough to make its presence heavy. And the massive carrier kept moving. That was the core of the response. The sleeping giant did not flinch. At 5:43, Contact 6 carved a sharp turn, trying to cut behind the U.S. destroyer. The maneuver seemed hostile on radar screens. From the sky, it looked even worse. Its bow sliced through the destroyer's projected wake, trying to box in the American escort from both sides. The destroyer made one single correction. Clean, controlled, perfectly logged. It blocked the crossing path without breaking its defensive screen. Down in combat info, the surface warfare coordinator spoke without blinking at his console. Right escort remains between the carrier and the Iranian line. Defense intact. For the first time in nearly 10 tense minutes, the Iranian formation blinked. Contact 5 dropped its speed by 2 knots, then 3. Contact 6 halted its aggressive turn and leveled out. It was subtle but clear. Nothing hid in the Strait of Hormuz now. The Seahawk and destroyer watched. The carrier saw it. The FA-18s overhead watched those ocean wakes lose their hard edge. Then the American radio warning broadcasted again, this time blasting over open frequencies. Iranian naval vessels, your maneuvers are unsafe and highly escalatory. Your actions are being recorded. Alter course right now and maintain a safe distance. A heavy silence dragged on. Then Contact 3 altered its radar. That targeting beam faded. The broad surface sweep stayed on, but that lethal, sharp tone vanished from the warfare screens. Targeting emissions ceased, the combat center confirmed. Nobody cheered. Those Iranian gunboats were still tight, still shifting, still a massive threat. but the momentum had officially shifted. At 5:45, Contact 1, the lead warship that had crossed directly ahead of the carrier, started a slow, wide turn away. It did not pull back with panic, it didn't run. It quietly widened its angle by a few small degrees. The exact kind of move that lets a commander save face while quietly aborting a failed ambush. The carrier held its heading, the destroyer locked its screen, the Hornets circled. The U.S. Navy hadn't fired a single shot, but they exposed the trap, then crushed it using sheer presence, radar sensors, and iron discipline. At 5:46, Contact 5 cut its speed. Contact 6 simply followed. That Iranian second line started to stretch and break shape. What looked like a coordinated ambush 8 minutes ago was falling apart, hesitant and completely exposed under American watch. Then, at 5:47, the first Iranian warship peeled away. Its wake banked north. A second followed. The trap around the carrier began dissolving, but one Iranian ship stayed locked in. Contact 3 hovered right in the channel, still holding a highly lethal angle. Still close enough to strike. Still the ship whose missile radar flashed moments ago. Combat information marked it fast. Contact 3 holding course. The captain scanned the screen. 5 ships were backing off. 1 refused. Outside, the carrier pushed through the Strait of Hormuz. Dead ahead, that last Iranian warship held the line. At 5:47, 5 Iranian warships backed down. 1 held its ground. On the tactical screen, Contact 3 stayed frozen near the center of the kill zone. Still pointed right at the American fleet, keeping every sensor locked dead in its direction. Its targeting radar had suddenly gone dark. But nobody inside the combat center took that as a comfort. Quiet did not mean safe. Quiet just meant waiting. Contact 3 holding course, the combat center reported. Range 3.8 miles. Speed is steady. The captain stood by the main display, watching closely. Any new signals? Negative on guidance radar. Surface search only. What about deck activity? The Seahawk chopper radioed back, still seeing movement. Near the stern, no clear launch posture yet. The captain nodded. Keep tracking it. Outside, the Strait of Hormuz was starting to wake up. That first hint of dawn bled through the fog, turning the water cold gray. The American carrier drove forward, massive and unbothered, her flight deck buzzing with tense energy. High above her, 2 Super Hornets kept their tight orbits starboard. The escort destroyer held its blocking position, its bow slicing clean through the water between the massive carrier and that final Iranian ship. Those other Iranian boats had not vanished. They just backed off. 2 broke north, 2 killed their speed. 1 lingered off the carrier's rear quarter, still watching, a heavy reminder that this tense standoff was far from over. But the ambush was shattered. Only Contact 3 stayed on the board. At 5:49, the destroyer broadcast again. Iranian naval vessel, this is United States Navy warship. Your heading is highly unsafe. Turn away immediately and keep a safe distance from this strike group. This time the answer came in 6 seconds. Broken English. Faint signal, deadpan voice. United States vessel, we are running lawful patrols. You will adjust your course. The American comeback hit instantly. Iranian vessel, negative. United States Navy is making a lawful transit in international waters. We recorded your maneuvers. Turn away right now. No anger, no negotiating, no weakness. Just holding the line. On the chopper feed, Iranian sailors were pacing behind the bridge glass. 1 sailor stepped out onto the bridge wing, holding binoculars. Another guy looked back toward the launchers. The ship's wake stayed perfectly straight for 20 seconds. Then it shrank. Contact 3, throttling down. CIC, called out a 2-knot drop. The captain stayed quiet. He held off. 1 knot is just noise. 2 might mean caution. But steady deceleration meant something else entirely. The Iranian commander was finally looking for an exit strategy. At 5:51, Contact 3 slowed down again. Its bow swung just a few degrees. Not quite a full retreat yet, but definitely enough to matter. The Seahawk pilot hovered right off the ship's flank, perfectly visible. The sensor turret stayed locked on the aft deck. Above them, a Super Hornet cut across the horizon at a safe distance, a sharp black shadow against the morning sun. It didn't dive down. It made 0 threatening moves. It just flew past where every Iranian sailor on deck could see. The message was crystal clear. This carrier wasn't out here alone. At 5:52, Contact 3 turned 5 degrees north. Inside CIC, nobody cheered. The surface warfare coordinator just logged the new heading and waited for solid confirmation. Possible course change. He said stand by 10 more seconds, then another degree, then another. The deadly collision math finally vanished from the main screen. Contact 3 opening CPA. The closest approach point was growing. Range 4.2 nautical miles. For the first time since that initial radar spike, the tactical layout finally had room to breathe. Pushing through the Strait of Hormuz without shifting course, that was the real victory. Not a single missile fired, no warning shots cracking across the open water, and no American warship had flinched under the heavy pressure. Iran had really tried to force a moment. 6 warships boxing in a U.S. carrier, a tight sea lane, radar pings, radio silence, a setup designed to trigger panic. Instead, the Navy just turned their whole stunt into a lockdown sequence of hard evidence. Every Iranian course shift, every radar ping, every single movement on deck, every dead radio channel, every dangerously close crossing angle. The trap became a data file. At 5:55, Contact 3 finished its turn. Its bow finally swung clear of the carrier's projected path. The wake curved north, blending into the retreating pattern of the other Iranian boats. The trap was gone. The tension broke. That last warship was no longer pushing in. Carrier secure, CIC confirmed. The captain checked the screen one last time. Maintain watch. Recover aircraft when clear. The command echoed quietly across the entire strike group. The Seahawks held their station a few minutes longer, filming the Iranian fleet backing away. The Super Hornets circled above until the carrier safely cleared the narrowest choke point. The starboard destroyer kept up a heavy defensive screen until every single Iranian track showed separation and 0 new radar emissions. By 6:02, the strike group was still pushing steadily east. Same heading, same speed, same exact formation. Behind them, the Iranian fleet still showed up on radar, totally scattered now, not a crescent anymore, no longer blocking off the ocean. Their speed fell, their spacing drifted wide open, their window of opportunity slammed shut. Up on the bridge, the captain finally backed away from the tactical screen. No big speech, no victory lap, no cheering, just standard logs and quiet confirmations. And the silent discipline of a crew that fully understood what almost just went down. Below, CIC archived sensor data. Electronic warfare logs were packed up. They locked away the Seahawks' infrared feed. Every radio transmission got typed out. Radar tracks shot up the chain to 5th Fleet. The official story would be simple. Reckless Iranian naval maneuvers, situation de-escalated, carrier secure. But anyone glued to those screens knew the real story. 6 Iranian warships tried turning the Strait of Hormuz into a dead end. They wanted to choke off the space, provoke a reaction, and force America's ultimate symbol of naval dominance to flinch under heavy pressure. The massive ship never budged. The Navy didn't win that morning by shooting first. They won by refusing to blink. By 6:02, the sea was clear again. The Supercarrier kept pushing right through the channel. Steady, completely untouched, and exactly where it meant to be.